Dear listener, step into the shadows of ancient Rome, where the air is thick with dust and the scent of blood. In the heart of the empire, gladiators were both heroes and victims, men forced to fight for survival in a world that cheered their pain, captured in war, condemned for crimes, or driven by desperation. These men were molded into spectacles of violence, their lives bound to the arena's sand. Yet, amidst the horror, there was resilience, spark of hope for freedom, a dream of a name remembered. Their story is one of brutal training, deadly battles, and fleeting moments of humanity. As you settle into this tale, let the rhythm of their struggle lull you, like the soft clank of chains in a quiet cell. Join us now as we uncover the horrifying life of a Roman gladiator, where every fight was a dance with death and every survival a quiet victory. Dear listener, let your mind drift now to a world of dust and chains, where the sun beats down on a winding road and the air carries the faint temps of salt and despair. Picture a man, his wrists bound by rough hemp, his feet stumbling over stones as he is herded toward the heart of an empire that thrives on spectacle. It is the year 100 CE, and Rome stands as a colossus, its arenas hungry for blood, its streets alive with the clamor of power. This man, stripped of his name, his home, his past, is destined to become a gladiator figure, both revered and reviled, a man whose life will be spent fighting for the amusement of thousands. His story is one of loss, endurance, and the faint flicker of hope in a world that offers none. As you settle into this quiet corner of history, let the rhythm of his steps lull you, soft as the whisper of a breeze across the Tiber, steady as the heartbeat of a soul facing the unknown. Close your eyes and journey with us into the horrifying life of a Roman gladiator, where the path to the arena begins not with glory, but with chains. The journey to the arena was rarely one of choice. Most gladiators were not born to fight, were forced into it, their lives reshaped by the cruel hand of fate. Our man might have been a warrior from a distant land, perhaps a Dacian from the rugged hills beyond the Danube, captured during one of Rome's relentless campaigns. His village, a cluster of thatched huts nestled in a valley, was burned to ash, its people scattered or slain. He fought bravely, his spear steady against the advancing legions, but Rome's war machine was unstoppable. Bound in chains, he was torn from his family, his wife's cries fading, his children's faces a memory etched in pain. The march to Rome was long, stretching across mountains and plains, the air thick with dust and the groans of other captives. Each step was a reminder of his loss. Each night spent shivering under a tattered cloak, a testament to his new reality. Or perhaps he was no warrior, but a farmer, a craftsman, or a thief caught in the web of Roman justice. In the provinces, a man could be condemned for crimes as small as stealing bread or as grave as defying a magistrate. The courts were swift, their sentences harsh. Instead of execution, some were sentenced to damnatio, ad ludum condemnation, to the gladiator school. This was no mercy but a slower death, a chance to die not on a cross, but in the arena where blood fed the crowd's hunger. Our man, if a criminal, might have been a rebel, his defiance against Roman taxes or laws landing him in chains. His sentence was read in a dusty forum, the crowd jeering, his fate sealed by a bored official's nod. He was no longer a man, but a commodity, his life traded for spectacle. A rare few chose the arena, driven by desperation or delusion. These were the octorati free men who swore an oath to become gladiators, trading freedom for a chance at fame or fortune. Perhaps our man was one such soul, a debtor with no coin to pay, a veteran with no war to fight, or a youth chasing tales of gladiators who won riches and freedom. The oath was binding, stripping him of rights, placing him under the lanista whip. He might have stood in a market square, his voice trembling as he swore to endure burning, binding, beating, and death by the sword. The crowd watched, some with pity, others with scorn, but none could imagine the horror that awaited. For these men, the arena was a gamble, its rewards as fleeting as a summer breeze. The journey to Rome was a trial in itself. If captured in war, the man endured weeks or months of travel, chained to others in a coffle, their ankles raw from shackles. The road was unforgiving, dust choked their throats, the sun burned their skin, and hunger gnawed at their bellies. Roman slavers drove them forward, their whips cracking, their voices harsh. At night they camped under the stars, guarded by soldiers who saw them as less than human. The man might have whispered to a fellow captive, their languages different, but their pain the same, sharing stories of lost homes to keep despair at bay. The sea crossing, if it came, was worse cramped in the hold of a ship, the air rank with sweat and sickness, the waves a constant torment. Some died on the journey, their bodies tossed overboard, their names forgotten. Arrival in Rome was no relief. The city was a marvel, its temples gleaming, its aqueducts towering, its streets alive with the chatter of merchants and the clatter of carts. But for the captive, Rome was a prison, its grandeur a mockery of his fate. He was marched to a slave market, perhaps near the Forum, where he stood on a platform, his body exposed, his worth debated in coin. Buyers prodded his muscles, checked his teeth, assessed his spirit. A lanista, the master of a gladiator school, might see potential, a strong frame, a defiant gaze, the makings of a fighter. The man was sold for a handful of sesterces, his life reduced to a transaction. The crowd watched, some curious, others indifferent, as he was led away, his chains clinking, his future uncertain. The ludus was his destination, a fortified compound on the outskirts of Rome or near a provincial arena. The ludus gladiatorius was both school and prison, its walls high, its gates barred. The man was stripped of his past upon entry. His name, if he still clung to it, was replaced with a number or a title Melo Resiarius, Threx based on the fighting style he would learn. His clothes were taken, replaced with a coarse tunic, his hair cropped to mark his status. The lanista, a figure of absolute authority, inspected him, his eyes cold, his voice sharp. The man was now property, his value tied to his ability to fight and entertain. The ludus was a world apart, its air heavy with the scent of sweat, straw, and fear. The first night in the ludus was a shock. The man was led to a cell, a cramped space shared with others, the floor covered with damp straw, the walls rough stone. The air was thick, the silence broken by the snores or whimpers of his cellmates. He lay on a thin mat, his body aching from the journey, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The ludus was alive with sounds, the clank of chains, the creak of gates, the distant shouts of trainers. Sleep was elusive, a fleeting escape from the reality that now defined him. He might have clutched a small token stone from his homeland, a scrap of cloth, his only link to a life lost. The ludus housed men from across the empire, Gauls with braided hair, Thracians with fierce eyes, Africans whose languages echoed like songs. They were strangers, yet bound by a shared fate. The man saw their scars, their guarded glances, and knew he was one of them. The lanista ruled with an iron hand, his whip a constant threat, his word law. Discipline was brutal. A misstep could earn a beating, a whispered complaint a night. Without food, the man learned to move carefully, to watch the lanista's eyes, to hide his fear. His body was no longer his own, but a tool for Rome's entertainment. His life a coin to be spent in the arena. The first days were a blur of assessment and initiation. The lanista, or his trainers, tested the man's strength, his reflexes, his will. Was he fit for the heavy armor of a Murmillo, or the light net of a Riche de Cordier? Would he wield a sword, or would he break under pressure? The tests were grueling, running under the sun, lifting stones, sparring with wooden weapons. Failure was not an option. A weak man was sent to die in a minor bout, his life expendable. The man pushed through pain, his muscles straining, his breath ragged, knowing that survival began here, in the ludus's unforgiving yard. Food was a calculated necessity, designed to build muscle for the arena. The man was fed gladiator, sagana barley, porridge mixed with beans or lentils, sometimes flavored with herbs or fish sauce. It was bland but filling, meant to fatten him for battle, to cushion his body against blows. Meals were eaten in a communal hall, the men sitting on benches, their voices low. Water came from a trough, warm and gritty, but it was all they had. The man ate in silence, surrounded by faces that mirrored his own, worn, weary, resigned. Some offered a nod, a flicker of camaraderie, but trust was a risk. The ludus was a place of alliances, but also of rivalries, for only the strong would survive the arena. Training began in earnest, a relentless cycle that defined the gladiator's life. The man was handed a wooden sword, heavier than the real thing, and paired with a trainer, a scarred veteran whose eyes held no pity. Drills were endless, thrust, parry, dodge, strike, repeated until his arms burned and his legs trembled. The courtyard rang with the clash of wood, the shouts of trainers, the grunts of men pushed beyond endurance. The man learned to wield a gladius, a short sword, or perhaps a trident. Each swing was a lesson, each bruise a reminder of the arena's demands. Mistakes earned blows, success a grudging nod. The man's body adapted, his muscles hardening, but his mind carried the weight of what was to come. The ludus was a microcosm of Rome's cruelty, a place where men were forged into spectacles. The lanista profited from their fights, his wealth tied to their survival. He invested in their training, their food, their health, but not out of kindness. Each gladiator was an asset, his life a gamble for profit. The man learned to read the lanista's moods, to anticipate the whip, to hide his pain. He was taught not just to fight, but to perform, to make each strike dramatic, to draw cheers from the crowd. The arena was theater, and he was both actor and victim. His life a play written in blood, yet within the ludus there were moments of humanity. A fellow gladiator might share a crust of bread, their fingers brushing in a fleeting act of kindness. A whispered story of a distant home might pass between cells, a reminder of lives left behind. The man found solace in these small connections, though he knew they could break in the arena. He might carve a tally on his cell wall, counting days or dreams, a quiet rebellion against his erasure. The ludus sought to strip him of identity, but he clung to fragments of memory of a river, a song his mother sang, a hope that he might one day be free. The ludus was not just a school, but a crucible, shaping men into fighters while testing their spirits. The man saw others falter, some broken by the whip, others by despair. Those who failed were culled, sent to die in the arena, or sold to a harsher fate. The man resolved to endure, to learn, to survive. He watched the veterans, their scars, a map of survival, their eyes a warning of the cost. He listened to tales of the Colosseum, where crowds roared for blood, where a single fight could mean death or glory. The arena loomed, a specter in his thoughts, but so did the chance of freedom. However faint, as night fell, the ludus grew quiet, the air heavy with the scent of straw and oil lamps. The man lay on his mat, his body aching, his mind a storm of fear and hope. He might dream of his lost village, the laughter of his kin, or the open sky of a life he no longer knew. But dawn would come, bringing the lanista's call, the wooden sword, the endless drills. The path to the arena was a descent into horror, but it was also a test of will, a chance to prove he was more than a slave. As you drift, dear listener, let the echo of his chains fade, soft as the rustle of a cloak. The gladiator's journey was just beginning, a path paved with hardship, leading inexorably to the arena's sand. Dear listener, let your thoughts drift now to a world of stone and sweat, where the first light of dawn creeps over high walls, and the air hums with the clatter of wooden swords. Picture a man, his hands calloused from days of toil, standing in a dusty courtyard, under the watchful gaze of a master whose whip is never far. This is the ludus, the gladiator school, a fortress, where men are forged into fighters, their lives bound to the rhythm of discipline and despair. It is 100 CE, and Rome's arenas hunger for spectacle, their sands waiting to drink the blood of those trained here. Our man, stripped of his name, is no longer a captive or a criminal, but a gladiator in the making, his every breath a step toward the arena. As you settle deeper into this quiet tale, let the rhythm of his training lull you, soft as the rustle of straw in a cell, steady as the pulse of a heart steeled against fear. Close your eyes and join us in the horrifying world of the ludus, where survival is earned through pain, and hope is a whisper in the dark. The ludus was a world apart, a prison cloaked as a school, its purpose to transform broken men into spectacles for Rome's amusement. Tucked on the outskirts of Rome or near provincial arenas, its walls were thick, its gates barred, its air heavy with the scent of dust, oil, and fear. For our man, the ludus was a new kind of captivity, trading the open roads, chains for the confines of a courtyard and cell. The lanista, the master of the ludus, was a figure of absolute power, his voice a lash, his eyes cold as the coins he earned from each fight. He was part trainer, part jailer, his wealth tied to the blood of his gladiators, his cruelty a tool to shape them. The man learned quickly to fear the lanista, to watch his shadow, to bow his head when the whip cracked nearby. Life in the ludus began before dawn, the silence shattered by the lanista's bellow or the clang of a bell. The man rose from his straw mat, his body stiff from the cold stone floor, his cell a cramped space shared with 2 or 3 others. The air was thick, the straw damp with sweat or worse, the walls etched with scratches, tallies of days, names, or curses. He pulled on his tunic, a coarse woolen garment that chafed his skin, and stepped into the courtyard, where the first light cast long shadows. The ludus housed dozens, sometimes hundreds, of Mengals with braided hair, Thracians with fierce gazes, Nubians whose voices carried like songs. They were strangers, yet bound by a shared fate, their eyes meeting in silent recognition of the horror they faced. Training was the heart of the ludus, a relentless grind that shaped the man's body and mind for the arena. At dawn, he was handed a wooden sword, heavier than the real gladius, designed to build strength. His trainer, often a scarred veteran who had survived the arena, was a man of few words, his lessons delivered with blows or grunts. The drills were endless: thrust, parry, dodge, strike, repeated until the man's arms burned and his legs trembled. The courtyard rang with the clash of wood on wood, the shouts of trainers, the gasps of men pushed beyond endurance. Sweat stung his eyes, dust coated his throat, but he learned to move through pain, for the arena would offer no respite. The man's role in the arena determined his training. If chosen as a murmillo, he practiced with a heavy shield and short sword, his style mimicking a Roman legionary, his movements deliberate and powerful. As a retiarius, he wielded a net and trident, learning to dance with speed, to entangle his foe before striking. A threx carried a curved blade and small shield, his style fierce and agile. Each role was a performance designed to thrill the crowd, and the man was taught not just to fight, but to act, teach, strike, dramatic, each dodge a flourish. The trainers drilled him in pairs, pitting him against mock opponents, teaching him to read a foe's eyes, to anticipate a thrust. Sparring was brutal. Bruises bloomed like flowers, bones cracked, and blood stained the dust. A serious injury could end a man's life not from the wound, but from the lanista's decision that he was no longer worth training. The ludus was a hierarchy, its men ranked by skill and promise. Veterans, those who had survived multiple fights, held a grim prestige, their scars a currency of respect. The man, a novice, was at the bottom, his worth unproven. He watched the veterans, their movements fluid, their eyes distant, and tried to mimic their strength. But he also saw their weariness, their limps, the way they flinched at sudden sounds. The lanista favored the skilled, granting them better food or lighter duties, but even they were slaves, their lives as fragile as his own. The man learned to navigate this hierarchy, to avoid the veterans' wrath, to earn their nods through effort, a kind word from a scarred Thracian, a grunt of approval from a trainer, was a rare victory in a world of defeat. Discipline was the ludus's law, its rules enforced with unrelenting cruelty. A misstep in training, a moment of hesitation, could earn a lash from the lanista's whip, its crack echoing across the courtyard. Defiance was worse. A whispered complaint might mean a night without food, a fight against a veteran with no mercy shown. The man bore scars, not just from sparring, but from punishment, each mark a lesson in submission. The lanistas, overseers, patrolled the ludus, their eyes sharp, their clubs ready. Escape was a dream, but a deadly one. The walls were too high, the guards too vigilant, and a caught fugitive faced crucifixion or a beast in the arena. The man learned to bow his head, to hide his anger, to survive by obedience. Yet the Lanista's cruelty was tempered by calculation. Gladiators were investments, their lives a gamble for profit. A skilled fighter could earn thousands of sesterces in a single bout, filling the Lanista's coffers. The man was fed, trained, and mended, not out of kindness but economics. Physicians roamed the ludus, their hands rough but skilled, stitching cuts, setting bones, applying poultices of herbs or honey. A fever might be treated with willow bark, a sprain with rest, but only if the man was deemed valuable. Those too weak or broken were called, sent to die in minor fights, or sold to a harsher fate. The man saw men vanished, dragged away, their cells filled by new faces and, resolved to prove his worth, to endure the Lanista's gaze. Food was a cornerstone of the ludus, designed to build muscle for the arena. The man ate 3 times a day, his meals served in a communal hall where benches creaked under the weight of weary men. The staple was gladiator sagina, a thick barley porridge mixed with lentils, beans, or peas, sometimes flavored with garlic or fish sauce. It was bland, its texture gritty, but it filled the belly and cushioned the body against blows. Bread, coarse and chewy, was a daily offering, alongside water drawn from a well, warm and tasting of earth. Meat was rare, perhaps pork or fish on a festival day, its taste a fleeting joy. Vegetables like cabbage or leeks appeared occasionally, their bitterness a reminder of the world beyond the walls. The man ate in silence, his eyes on his bowl, surrounded by faces etched with hunger and dread. The diet was deliberate, meant to fatten gladiators for battle. The Lanista knew that a thicker body could withstand a blade's bite, that stamina came from calories. The man's frame filled out, his muscles hardening, but hunger lingered, a constant ache. He learned to savor each bite, to chew slowly, to make the meal last. Mealtimes were a rare pause, a moment to glance at his comrades, to catch a nod or a grimace. Some men shared a crust, a small act of kinship, while others guarded their portions, their eyes sharp. The ludus taught the man to value food, to see it as fuel, to know that each meal might be his last. Living conditions were as harsh as the training. The man's cell was a stone box, its floor covered with straw that was changed too rarely, its air thick with the scent of bodies and damp. He shared it with others, their snores or murmurs a constant companion. The mat beneath him was thin, the blanket tattered, the cold seeping through the walls. Privacy was a memory. Every moment was watched, every weakness noted. The ludus had latrines, crude pits that reeked, and a bathhouse where men washed in cold water, their skin scrubbed with oil and strigils. Cleanliness was enforced, not for comfort, but for health. A sick gladiator was a loss. The man learned to endure the chill, to ignore the stench, to find rest in a world that offered none. Bonds formed in the ludus, fragile but vital. The man might share a laugh with a Gaul over a clumsy spar, their humor a shield against despair. A Nubian might teach him a song, its rhythm a fleeting escape from the Lanista's whip. These friendships were lifelines, a reminder of humanity in a place that sought to erase it. Over meals, the men whispered of their homes, Thracians, mountains. An African's deserts their voices, low, to avoid the guards. The man listened, his heart stirring with memories of his own past. A village, now ash, a family lost. He shared his own tales, his voice halting, finding solace in the act of being heard. But trust was a risk. The lanista might pit friends against each other in the arena, a cruel test of loyalty. The man saw it happen, a Gaul and a Thracian, once brothers, forced to clash, their blades trembling. He learned to guard his heart, to cherish the moment but expect betrayal. Rivalries, too, simmered in the ludus. A veteran might scorn a novice, a skilled fighter hoard his knowledge, their egos clashing in sparring matches. The man navigated these tensions, his words careful, his actions measured, knowing that survival depended on allies as much as skill. Women were a rare presence in the ludus. Some gladiators had wives or lovers, their visits brief and overseen by guards. A woman might bring a scrap of cloth, a whispered word, a touch that lingered in the man's dreams. These moments were precious, a flicker of warmth in a cold world. But they were controlled, the lanista profiting from even this. Female gladiators, though rare, trained in some ludi, their presence a curiosity and a reminder of Rome's reach. The man might see one in the courtyard, her movements fierce, her eyes as guarded as his own. He respected her, but kept his distance, for connection was a luxury he could not afford. Religion offered little comfort in the ludus. The man might pray to Mars, god of war, or to the spirits of his homeland, carving a small offering, a twig, shaped like a man, a stone etched with a symbol in the corner of his cell. These acts were secret, for the lanista tolerated no rituals that might distract from training. The gods of Rome were distant, their temples closed to slaves, their favor reserved for citizens. The man found faith in his own hands, his own blade, his own will to survive. Before sleep, he might whisper a prayer, his voice barely audible, asking for strength, for mercy, for a day when he might walk free. The ludus was not just a place of training, but of transformation. The man's body changed, his shoulders broadened, his arms thickened, his stance steadied, but his mind changed too, learning to suppress fear, to focus on the moment, to see each day as a battle won. He watched the veterans, their scars a map of survival, their silence a warning of the arena's toll. He heard tales of the colosseum, where crowds roared for blood, where a single fight could mean death or glory. The arena loomed, a specter, in his thoughts, but so did the rudis, the wooden sword of freedom, a dream that kept him moving through the pain. Moments of rebellion were small but vital. The man might carve his initials in his cell, a mark that said he existed. He might share a stolen glance with a comrade, their defiance unspoken but shared. These acts were his resistance, proof that the ludus could not break him. He dreamed of escape, of scaling the walls, of vanishing into Rome's alleys, but the risks were too great. Instead, he poured his defiance into training, each swing of his sword a refusal to surrender. The lanista saw his effort, his potential, and marked him for greater fights, a double-edged honor that brought both pride and dread. As night fell, the ludus grew still, the air heavy with the scent of oil lamps and straw. The man lay on his mat, his body aching, his mind a storm of hope and fear. He might dream of his lost home, a river's sparkle, a child's laughter of the arena, its sand red with blood. The ludus was his world now, its walls a cage, its rhythm a chain. But within him burned a spark, a belief that he could survive, that he could be more than a slave. As you drift, dear listener, let the sounds of the ludus fade, soft as the echo of a wooden sword in the dark. The gladiator's life in the ludus was a crucible of horror, but it forged him for the arena, where his true test awaited, dear listener. Let your mind drift now to a world ablaze with light and sound, where the air trembles with the roar of thousands and the ground is stained with the memory of blood. Picture a man, our gladiator, standing in a dark tunnel, his hand gripping a sword, his heart pounding as the gate before him creaks open. Beyond lies the Colosseum, Rome's grand stage, its arches towering, its sand a canvas for life and death. It is 100 CE, and the empire's hunger for spectacle is insatiable, its arenas feeding on the courage and despair of men like him. This is the moment he was forged for, trained for, feared for, a dance with death, where survival is a fleeting gift. As you settle deeper into this quiet tale, let the rhythm of the crowd's chants lull you, soft as the whisper of a breeze across the Tiber, steady as the pulse of a man facing his fate. Close your eyes and join us in the horrifying heart of the Roman arena, where every fight is a spectacle and every breath a place where the empire's power and cruelty were laid bare. The Colosseum, completed in 80 CE under Emperor Titus, was its crown jewel, a massive oval of stone that could hold 50,000 spectators and aetors in marble seats. Merchants in the middle tiers, slaves and women crowded in the upper rows. Its arches soared, its hypogeum below a labyrinth of cages and pulleys that birthed men and beasts onto the sand. Provincial arenas, from Pompeii to Ephesus, were smaller but no less deadly, their crowds just as ravenous. For our gladiator, the arena was a crucible, a place where his training in the ludus met the reality of Rome's bloodlust. His first fight might be a minor bout, a prelude to grander spectacles, but even these were a gamble with death. The day of the fight began before dawn, the ludus buzzing with a tense energy. The man was roused from his cell, the straw beneath him damp, the air thick with the scent of oil and fear. He was led to the armory, a dim room lined with weapons and armor, where he was fitted for combat. If a murmillo, he donned a heavy bronze helmet with a fish-shaped crest, its weight pressing on his shoulders, its visor narrowing his world to slits. His right arm bore a manica, a padded sleeve, and his left held a rectangular shield, curved to deflect blows. A short gladius hung at his side, its edge sharp enough to cut through flesh and bone. As a retiarius, he wore no helmet, his body exposed save for a shoulder guard, his weapons a net and trident, his strength in speed and cunning. A threx carried a curved sica and a small square shield, his style fierce and agile. Each role was a costume designed as much for spectacle as for survival. The armor polished to catch the sun, the crowd's eyes drawn to its gleam. The preparation was a ritual, both practical and performative. The man's body was oiled, his muscles glistening to highlight his strength, a nod to the crowd's love of beauty in violence. His wounds, if any, were bandaged tightly, the pain dulled with wine or herbs, though nothing could silence the fear in his gut. He was inspected by the lanista, whose eyes scanned for weakness, his voice sharp with last-minute commands. The man stood still, his breath shallow, as trainers adjusted straps, tightened belts, or whispered advice: strike fast, guard your left, please the crowd. These words were a lifeline, but also a reminder that he was a pawn in a larger game, his life a coin spent for profit and glory. The journey to the arena was a procession, a spectacle in itself. The gladiator was marched through Rome's streets, chained or guarded, the city's bustle partying around him. Citizens stared, some with pity, others with excitement, children pointing at his armor. The colosseum loomed, its shadow swallowing the man as he approached. Smaller arenas, like those in Capua or Verona, were no less imposing, their walls echoing with the ghosts of past fights. He entered through a side gate, the air growing cooler, the light dimming as he descended into the tunnels. The hypogeum was a maze of stone and wood, its air heavy with the scent of beasts and blood. Cages rattled with lions or bears, their growls a low menace, while slaves scurried to prepare the arena above. The man waited, his heart a drum, the darkness pressing against him. The moment of entry was electric. The gate opened, and sunlight flooded the tunnel, blinding him as he stepped onto the sand. The Colosseum's roar hit like a wave, 50,000 voices chanting, jeering, or cheering. The sand was raked smooth but treacherous, hiding stones or slick with the morning's blood. The crowd was a sea of faces: senators in togas, women waving handkerchiefs, plebeians shouting for violence. The man's opponent stood across the arena, his armor glinting, his stance a mirror of his own. They might be strangers, or worse, comrades from the ludus, their bond now a blade's edge. A herald announced their roles: Murmillo versus Ricciarius, the crowd's roar swelling, their thirst for blood palpable. The fight began with a trumpet's blare, its note sharp against the din. The man moved, his training taking over, his body a machine of muscle and instinct. As a Murmillo, he advanced slowly, shield raised, gladius ready, his weight balanced to absorb a blow. As a Ricciarius, he danced, net swirling, trident poised, his eyes locked on his foe's movements. The sand shifted underfoot, forcing him to adjust, his senses heightened. The crowd's shouts, Eugala, kill or mit, spare, were a distant hum, his world narrowing to the man before him. A Threx might charge, his curved blade flashing, while a Secutor pressed forward, his heavy armor a wall of menace. Each style was a dance, its steps choreographed by training, its outcome a gamble. The fight was chaos cloaked in skill. The man struck, his blade clashing against a shield, the impact jarring his arm. He dodged, feeling the whistle of a trident past his ear, his heart lurching. Wounds came quickly, slash to the forearm, blood hot and slick, a gash across the thigh, pain like fire. He fought through it, his training a shield against panic, his breath ragged but controlled. The crowd's mood shifted with each blow, their cheers swelling for a daring strike, their jeers sharp for a stumble. The fight could last minutes or an hour, depending on the men, the weapons, the editor's whim. Stamina was as vital as skill, for exhaustion was a killer, slowing the arm, clouding the mind. Death was not certain, but ever present. Some fights were signed missionite to the death where only one man left the sand alive. Others allowed surrender, the defeated raising a finger, his eyes pleading with the crowd. The editor decided, guided by the crowd's will. Thumbs up meant life, a chance to limp back to the ludus. Thumbs down meant death, the victor's blade swift, the crowd's roar drowning the final gasp. The man knew this ritual, had seen it in training, had dreamed of it in his cell. If he fell, he might beg for mercy, his pride swallowed by the hope of another day. If he won, he stood tall, his sword raised, the crowd's cheers a bitter reward, for he remained a slave. The arena was more than man against man. Some fights pitted gladiators against beasts, lions, tigers, or bears, starved to ensure ferocity. These Venetians were a crowd favorite, the animals' roars mingling with the spectators' screams. The man might face a lion with only a spear, its claws a blur, its jaws a death sentence. His training offered little protection, his courage his only shield. The crowd loved the chaos, cheering as man and beast clashed. But for the gladiator, each growl was a brush with oblivion. Other spectacles included mock battles, naumachia with flooded arenas, or reenactments of Roman victories, where gladiators played doomed enemies, their deaths scripted but real. The crowd was the arena's true master, their voices shaping the gladiator's fate. They loved a brave fighter, cheering a daring dodge or a clever strike. A Retiarius who entangled his foe's sword might win their hearts. A Murmillo who stood firm under a barrage their respect. But they were fickle, turning on a man who faltered, their jeers a weight heavier than armor. Women threw flowers, men bet coins, children mimicked the moves, but all craved blood. The emperor, if present, was the ultimate judge, his gesture final. The man learned to play to the crowd, to raise his sword in triumph, to bow despite his pain, for their favor could mean life. Victory, if it came, was fleeting. The man was led from the arena, his body aching, his wounds bleeding. A palm branch or a small purse of coins might be pressed into his hand, a token of his survival. The crowd's cheers faded as he passed through the gate, the tunnel's darkness swallowing him. Physicians waited below, their hands rough but practiced, stitching cuts with flax thread, applying poultices of herbs or vinegar, or cauterizing wounds with hot iron. The pain was searing, infection a lurking threat, but the man endured, his survival a fragile victory. He was returned to the ludus, his glory a memory, his next fight a shadow on the horizon. Defeat was a different story. A fallen gladiator was dragged from the sand, his body stripped of armor, his fate sealed. If spared, he faced shame, his wounds a mark of failure. If killed, his body was carried to the spoliarium, a grim chamber where the dead were piled, their blood mingling with the stench of decay. Slaves stripped the corpses, their weapons recycled, their names forgotten. Each fight was a gamble, each survival a delay of the inevitable. Yet he fought on, driven by the hope of freedom, the rudis a wooden sword that meant release from slavery, a distant dream. The arena was not just a place of death, but of performance. The man was taught to make each fight a spectacle, to draw out the drama, to feed the crowd's hunger. A Retiarius might pause, net raised, letting the crowd cheer his daring. A Murmillo might clash shields, the sound echoing like thunder. The man learned to hide his fear, to mask his pain, to make each blow a story. The arena was theater, and he was both actor and victim, his life. A play written in blood and sand. Life after the fight was no respite. A victorious gladiator returned to the ludus, his wounds bandaged, his body bruised. He might share a rare laugh with comrades, their relief a fragile bond. But the Lanista's whip waited. The next fight loomed. A defeated gladiator, if spared, faced scorn. His status in the ludus diminished. His next bout, a chance to redeem or die. The man carried the arena's weight in his bones, his dreams haunted by the clash of steel, the roar of the crowd. He might carve a tally in his cell, marking fights survived. A quiet defiance against the Lanista's rule. The arena was a mirror of Rome's soul, grand, cruel, and unyielding. It celebrated strength but devoured the weak, honored courage but demanded blood. The gladiator was its heart, his life a sacrifice to the empire's glory. Yet in his struggle he was more than a slave. He fought with a fire that no chain could extinguish, a will that no whip could break. Each fight was a testament to his endurance, each survival a quiet victory. The crowd saw a spectacle, but he lived a horror, his every breath a defiance of death. As the sun sets over the Colosseum, imagine the man standing on the sand, his fight done, his fate decided. The crowd's roar fades, the arena growing still, the air heavy with the scent of blood and dust. He is alive, for now his body scarred, his heart heavy with the knowledge of battles to come. The arena is his world, its sand, his stage, its cruelty, his reality. As you drift, dear listener, let the echo of the crowd soften, like the distant hum of a fading chant. The gladiator's life in the arena was a spectacle of horror, but it was also a testament to his resilience, a spark that burned bright against Rome's darkness. Rest now as his story continues, with isolation, hope, and legacy still to unfold, dear listener. Let your mind drift now to a world of shadows and silence, where the clatter of Rome's streets fades into a distant hum, and a man sits alone. In a stone cell, the air heavy with the scent of straw and despair. Picture our gladiator, his hands scarred from training, his eyes tracing the rough walls that cage him, his heart a quiet storm of longing and loss. Beyond these walls, the empire thrives, temples gleam under the sun. Markets buzz with voices, citizens weave through a city alive with purpose. But for him, that world is a dream, as unreachable as the stars. He is a gladiator, a man both celebrated and scorned, his life bound to the ludus and the arena, his existence marked by a stigma that cuts deeper than any blade. It is 100 CE, and Rome's spectacle of blood casts a long shadow over those who fight for it. As you settle deeper into this quiet tale, let the stillness of his world wrap around you, soft as the flicker of a dying lamp, steady as the breath of a man alone with his thoughts. Close your eyes and join us in the horrifying solitude of a Roman gladiator, where isolation is a chain, and connection a fleeting spark in the sprawling tapestry of Roman society. Gladiators occupied a paradoxical place, heroes to the crowd, yet outcasts to the world. They were infamia, a legal and social status that branded them as less than human, akin to actors, prostitutes, or gravediggers. This mark stripped them of dignity, barring them from the rights that even the poorest citizen held dear. Our gladiator, whether a captured Dacian warrior, a condemned thief, or a desperate volunteer, carried this stigma like a weight on his soul. In the arena, he was a spectacle, his strength cheered, his blood craved. But beyond the sand, he was invisible, a shadow in a city of marble, his existence tolerated only for the entertainment he provided. The crowd's roars were fleeting, their adoration a hollow echo that faded with the day's end, leaving him to face the truth of his place in Rome's unforgiving hierarchy. The ludus, the gladiator school, was his world, a fortress of stone and discipline where isolation was both enforced and inevitable. Tucked away from Rome's bustling heart, its walls were a barrier between the gladiator and the society that shunned him. The lanista, the master of the ludus, was his only link to that world. But his authority was rooted in control, not connection. The gladiator's days were regimented training, eating, sleeping with no space for the freedoms others took for granted. He could not wander Rome's forums, haggle in its markets, or pray in its temples. His life was confined to the courtyards. Dust, the cell's damp straw, the lanista's whip, the city's vibrancy, its festivals, its laughter, its life was a rumor, a tale told by new arrivals or overheard from guards, as distant as the homeland he had lost. The infamia status was more than a legal label. It was a social death. A gladiator could not vote, hold office, or marry freely. His children, if he had any, were born slaves, their futures as bleak as his own. He could not own property, sign contracts, or testify in court. These were the rights of citizens, and he was no citizen, but property owned by the lanista, his worth measured in coin and blood. Even freedmen, former slaves who had earned their liberty, held more status, for they could integrate into Rome's fabric, however humbly. The gladiator, even if he won the rudis, the wooden sword of freedom, carried the stain of infamia forever. His past a chain that no victory could break. Our man felt this exclusion in every glance from a guard, every jeer from a citizen as he was marched to the arena. Every moment when the world turned its back, Rome's elite despised gladiators, seeing them as symbols of base instincts. Yet they funded the games, their wealth buying the blood that thrilled the mob. Senators and emperors sat in the colosseum's best seats, their togas pristine, their faces composed, but their presence endorsed the gladiator's suffering. Philosophers like Seneca decried the game's brutality, yet attended their words, empty against the crowd's roar. The gladiator was a tool, his courage exploited, his pain a currency for political favor. The crowd loved him, but only as a spectacle. His name might be scrawled on tavern walls, his victories sung in songs, but he was no friend, no neighbor, no man in their eyes. Women swooned at his scars, their fascination a mix of lust and pity, but their interest was fleeting, a fantasy that ended with the fight. The gladiator's isolation was not just external, but internal, a psychological toll that gnawed at his spirit. He was a man without a future, his life measured in fights, his worth in survival. Memories of his past, a village's laughter, a family's warmth, a life of purpose haunted him, their clarity fading with each day in the ludus. In his cell, he might trace those memories, his fingers brushing the rough stone, his heart aching for a world he could no longer touch. But the ludus offered no space for grief, no time for reflection. Training demanded focus. The lanista's whip silenced doubt, and the arena's shadow loomed over every thought. The man learned to bury his pain, to lock away his longing, for emotion was a weakness that could cost him his life. Yet, within the ludus, there were flickers of connection, fragile bonds that offered a semblance of humanity. The gladiator lived among others, like him men from across the empire, each bearing their own scars, their own stories. A Gaul with braided hair might share a crust of bread, his grin a spark in the gloom. A Thracian, his eyes fierce but kind, might teach a song, its melody a bridge to a lost home. A Nubian, his voice deep as a river, might whisper tales of deserts and stars, his words a balm for the soul. These men were strangers, their languages a jumble of sounds, but their shared fate wove them together. Over meals, in the communal hall where benches creaked and porridge cooled, they exchanged glances, nods, or halting words, their silences as meaningful as their speech. These bonds were vital, a shield against the ludus's crushing isolation. The man found solace in a shared laugh, a moment when a comrade's jest cut through the weight of their lives. During training, a partner might offer a tip how to angle a shield, how to dodge a net, their knowledge, a gift born of survival. In the bathhouse, where cold water stung and strigils scraped oil from skin, the men stood shoulder to shoulder, their banter a fleeting escape. The man might listen to a Dacian's tale of mountains, his own memories stirring a river's sparkle, a child's voice. He shared his own stories, his voice low, to avoid the guards, finding strength in being heard. These moments were rare, but they were his rebellion, proof that he was more than a slave, more than a spectacle. But trust was a luxury, as fragile as a reed in a storm. The lanista knew the power of bonds and used it against them. Friends could be pitted in the arena, their blades forced to clash, their loyalty a casualty of Rome's cruelty. The man saw it happen, a Gaul and a Thracian, once brothers, facing each other in the Colosseum, their eyes wet with betrayal. The crowd cheered, oblivious to the pain, their roars drowning the men's anguish. The man learned to guard his heart, to cherish the moment but expect the worst. A comrade's laughter was a gift, but it could turn to a scream in the arena. He formed alliances, but kept them shallow, his trust a coin he could not afford to spend. Rivalries, too, simmered in the ludus, a natural outgrowth of men competing for survival. Veterans, their scars a badge of honor, might scorn novices, their words sharp as blades. A skilled Murmillo might hoard his techniques, his pride a wall against the new. The man, still a novice, navigated these tensions, his deference a shield, his effort a bid for respect. Sparring matches were battlegrounds for egos. Auretiarius's net clashing with a secutor's shield, their grunts laced with rivalry. The lanista encouraged this, knowing that competition sharpened skills, but it deepened the gladiator's isolation, pitting man against man in a world already cruel. Women were a rare presence, their touch a distant memory for most. Some gladiators had lovers, slaves, freed women, or even noble women drawn to the thrill of danger. These relationships were controlled, visits overseen by the lanista, who profited from even this. A woman might slip into the ludus, her face veiled, her words whispered through bars, her hand brushing the gladiators in a moment of stolen warmth. For our man, such a visit was a dream, a flicker of connection that lingered in his sleep. Female gladiators, though rare, trained in some ludi, their presence a curiosity. He might see one in the courtyard, her movements as fierce as his, her eyes as guarded, her stigma even heavier. He respected her, but kept his distance, for connection was a risk, and love a luxury he could not afford. Religion offered little solace in the ludus. The man might pray to Mars, god of war, or to the spirits of his homeland, carving a small offering, a twig shaped like a spear, a stone etched with a rune in the corner of his cell. These acts were secret, for the lanista tolerated no rituals that might distract from training. The gods of Rome were distant, their temples closed to slaves, their favor reserved for those who cheered in the colosseum's stands. The man's faith was in his own hands, his own blade, his own will to survive. Before sleep, he might whisper a prayer, his voice barely audible, asking for strength, for mercy, for a day when he might walk free. But the arena was a godless place, its only deities, the crowd and the editor, their verdict absolute, the gladiators. Isolation was deepened by his status as a commodity. He was property, his life owned by the lanista, his worth tied to his ability to fight and entertain. The lanista invested in him food to build muscle, physicians to mend wounds, trainers to hone skills, but this was not care, but calculation. A gladiator who won brought profit. One who failed was discarded. The man felt this in every inspection, every nod or scowl from the lanista, every moment when his life was weighed in coin. He was a tool, a spectacle, a means to an end, and this knowledge ate at him, a slow poison that deepened his solitude. Yet there were moments of defiance, small acts that kept his spirit alive. He might carve his initials in his cell, a mark that said he existed, a name the ludus could not erase. He might share a stolen glance with a comrade, their defiance unspoken but shared, a spark that said they were more than slaves. These acts were his resistance, proof that the ludus could not break him. He dreamed of freedom, of scaling the walls, of vanishing into Rome's alleys, but the risks were too great: crucifixion, beasts, or a return to worse chains. Instead, he poured his defiance into training. Each swing of his sword, a refusal to surrender. Each day survived. The psychological toll of isolation was relentless. The man's mind was a battleground, his thoughts a storm of fear, hope, and grief. He dreamed of his past, a village's warmth, a family's embrace, but woke to the ludus's cold reality. Nightmares of the arena haunted him, the sand red, the crowd's roar, a tide that drowned him. He learned to suppress these thoughts, to focus on the moment, but they lingered, a weight that grew heavier with each fight. The ludus offered no respite, no confidant, no space to heal. The man carried his pain alone, his silence a shield, his endurance a testament to his strength. The gladiator's world was one of contradictions. He was adored yet despised, a hero yet a slave, a man yet a shadow. The crowd's cheers were a drug, lifting him in the arena, but their silence was a void, reminding him of his place. He lived for their favor, yet knew it was fleeting, a gust that could turn to scorn. His comrades were his family, yet his foes, their bonds a lifeline, yet a trap. The ludus was his home, yet his prison, its walls a cage, yet a shield. These contradictions shaped him, his heart torn between hope and despair, his spirit a flame that flickered but did not die. As night falls over the ludus, imagine the man. In his cell, the world outside a distant hum. The air is heavy, the straw beneath him damp, the silence broken by a comrade's snore or a guard's step. He lies on his mat, his body aching from training, his mind a storm of memories and fears. He might trace the walls, scratches, each mark a story, a life, a dream. He is alone, yet not alone, surrounded by men who share his fate, yet separated by the ludus's chains. His life is a paradox, his heart a battleground, his hope a spark in the dark. As you drift, dear listener, let the stillness of his cell envelop you, soft as the glow of a fading lamp. The gladiator's isolation was a horror, but his resilience was a light, a quiet strength that carried him toward the arena's next test. Rest now as his story continues, with hope and legacy still to unfold. Dear listener, let the gladiator's tale rest now as the colosseum's roar fades into silence. His life was a harrowing odyssey, chains of captivity, brutal training, arenas blood-soaked sand, and a world that shunned him. A Dacian warrior or condemned thief, he fought not just for survival, but for a dream of freedom. The Rudis, a distant star. Each clash was a defiance of Rome's cruelty, each scar a testament to resilience. Though infamia marked him, his courage burned bright, his name whispered in taverns, his legacy etched in stone. The crowd cheered his strength, but forgot his pain, their favor fleeting, his solitude profound. Yet, in the ludus's shadows, he found fleeting bonds, a spark of humanity that no whip could extinguish. His story, one of horror and hope, mirrors the human spirit's unyielding will. As the arena's dust settles, imagine him standing, blade lowered, alive for another day. His life was a sacrifice to Rome's spectacle, but his endurance was his own. Rest now, dear Liz.